the Grouchy Nerd.
Alright, quiet down, knuckleheads. It's time to take another look at a new hero for Fantasy Flight Games Marvel Champions. This time we're looking at Bishop. Lucas Bishop and his sister Shard were born into a world in which Hope Summers, daughter of Cable and first mutant to be born after Scarlet Witch's very bad day, also known as M-Day, which all but wiped out mutant kind, became the mutant messiah. Hope reversed M-Day, but in the process killed 1 million humans in an event called the 6-Minute War. Humans did not take that well. In this dystopic alternate future, mutants are hunted down and placed in concentration camps, so she saved mutant kind from extinction just to get them targeted for extinction. Nice job, Hope. Very cool. Bishop and his sister were born in one of these camps and tattooed with an identifying M. Marvel Comics and subtlety. Name a less iconic duo. The remaining free mutants and non-dickhead humans eventually united and overthrew the Sentinels, and Bishop ended up on the streets. He and his sister were reunited in Vegas, where Bishop became enamored of a group known as Xavier's Security Enforcers, a group dedicated to carrying on Charles Xavier's dream of human-mutant harmony. It was around this time that his litany of mutant abilities began to develop. He has accelerated healing, as well as enhanced strength, speed, stamina, reflexes, senses, and endurance, and is immune to most poisons. He also has really good aim. Basically, if you were a female character, there would be whole websites called bishopisamarysue.com. But the real story is his energy absorption and conversion. He can basically convert any energy sent his way, including somehow psionic energy, into concussive blasts. And the psionic energy absorption also means he's highly resistant to psychic manipulation. He and his sister joined the XSE and quickly rose through the ranks as officers, though Bishop opted to keep a lower rank to hang out with his pals Malcolm and Randall, and I think that's sweet. Shard, however, fell victim to an ambush set by her ex-boyfriend Trevor Fitzroy and turned into an M-Plate, a creature which feeds on mutants, and Bishop was forced to kill her. Bishop, Malcolm, and Randall then followed Fitzroy's group through a time portal to the 1990s with no way home. Bishop and his team fought the bad guys, but Bishop, badly wounded himself, was the only survivor from either group. But he made the most of it by joining the X-Men, which somehow didn't cause paradox after paradox after paradox. When M-Day finally came around, Bishop and his resistance to psionic energy was one of the few mutants who retained their powers. And when Hope was born, Bishop believed killing her would prevent the future he grew up in. Yeah, the new guy to the game spent quite a lot of time trying to kill a baby. Just trying to kill his friend's baby. He even accidentally shot Professor Xavier in the head while firing wildly, trying, and I cannot stress this enough, to kill a baby. He also lost an arm, but then got a bionic one, so that seems like a win for him, which I don't think you should get to have if you're trying to kill your friend's baby. And it went on for kind of a long time. He was a full-on Cable villain. He even teamed up with Strife, Cable's evil clone. And I mean, a long time. Bishop chased Cable and Hope through time thanks to his bionic arm, which allowed him to time slip, for 17 years. Cable, finally having quite enough of that thank you, sent Bishop to the year 6700 with no way to return, where he finally decided that trying to kill a baby was maybe not cool. Since then, he was possessed by the Demon Bear, who used his body to get back to the past, fought Storm and Psylocke, the latter of whom was able to detect and exorcise the Demon Bear and any lingering obsession with Hope, but leaving Bishop comatose. He woke up and helped X-Force stop Charles Xavier's sister Cassandra. He and Hope were both kidnapped by Strife, and Hope almost killed him, but then they made up. He fought the Shadow King, was disassembled by X-Man, a very powerful alternate version of Cable, kind of, and he took the role of Captain Commander of Krakoa, the mutant sanctuary that's also a living island, when Cyclops stepped down. So he was a good guy, future cop man. I'm gonna kill a baby. I'm gonna kill my friend's baby. Hey, do you want to lead our military? That's quite an arc. Let's take a look. On his hero side is Bishop, who does 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 1 defense. He's got 12 hit points, a hand size of 5, and the temporal and X-Men traits. He also has energy absorption. As a response, after Bishop takes any amount of damage from an attack, discard an equal number of cards from the top of your deck. Add each resource card discarded this way to your hand. So each time you get hit by an attack, you have the chance to get a load of resources into your hand, but what you're definitely going to be doing is discarding a bunch of cards off the top of your deck that you might actually really want to see. And potentially more importantly, you're going to be speeding your way through an extra encounter card pretty often. You're going to be cycling this deck quite a lot. Now, it is worth noting that this is not a forced response. It's an optional response. If you're getting to the end of your deck and you're like, I can't really afford taking 2 encounter cards this turn, or maybe you already have another 1 or 2 coming from a different place and you don't want to have 3 or 4, you cannot do this. But it's also really encouraging you to take hits. His defense is only 1, so defending, exhausting to defend, isn't really going to be worth it. You're saving yourself 1 point of damage and you're exhausting to do it. It's not that great. So you're going to be taking these hits pretty much just straight to the face. Over on his alter ego side is Lucas Bishop, who gets the standard hand size increase of 1 and the standard swapping of the X-Men trait for mutant. His recovery is 4 and he gains temporally displaced. As a response, after you change to this form, add a temporal card from your discard pile into your hand. Again, not a forced response, but why would you ever not do that? And the only cards that have that trait, at least so far, are in Bishop's hero kit, so it's going to be one of his hero cards that you're going to be finding in your discard pile, probably one of the ones that you discarded off the top one after you took a big hit, and you want to get it back into your hand, mind you. A lot of heroes, when you're taking something out of their discard pile and doing anything with it, it's getting shuffled back into your deck. This guy gets it directly into his hand, and that is awesome. Up first in his kit is Malcolm. He's a 3-cost ally with 3 hit points and the Temporal and X-Men trait. He does 1 thwart and 2 attack, and once per turn as an action, discard a resource card from your hand to ready Malcolm. If that resource card had a printed physical resource, heal 1 damage from it. That's a solid ally. He's got the Temporal trait, so you can bring him out of your discard pile into your hand, and you've got the potential to keep him around for kind of a while. Then we get Randall, another 3-cost ally with 3 hit points, who also has the Temporal and X-Men traits. He does 2 thwart and 1 attack, and once per turn as an action, discard a resource card from your hand to ready Randall. If it has an energy resource printed on it, heal 1 damage from it. Heck yeah! He's probably the more useful of the two, so you can focus on doing damage, and then you got an ally who's doing 2 threat who can stick around. You can heal him. He's going to do a lot of threat management for you. 1 copy of Bishop's Rifle is next. It's a 2-cost weapon upgrade with the Temporal trait and the restricted keyword. As a hero action, exhaust Bishop's Rifle and choose an enemy. Deal 1 damage to that enemy for each resource card in your hand. And it has ranged, so you get to ignore retaliate. Obviously, the ideal here is that you have, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 resource cards in your hand, so this is a pretty solid hit, and there's a pretty good shot of that. If you just came off the villain phase and took a big punch to the face, you discarded a bunch of cards, hopefully got a few resource cards back into your hand, and now you're using your rifle. But even if you only have 1 resource card in your hand, it's still really nice to take off a tough status or something. Next is 1 copy of Bishop's Uniform, another 2-cost temporal upgrade. As a response, after you resolve energy absorption, exhaust Bishop's Uniform to heal 1 damage from Bishop for each resource card in your hand. Again, gonna depend pretty heavily on how you build your deck. If you have a bunch of resource cards, this is more likely to go off a bunch of times and to heal you for quite a lot, especially later in the game when you've put out allies and supports and upgrades, and your deck is getting pretty thin, and you may only have mostly resources left, so every time you take a hit, you're healing right back up again. Then we get 2 copies of Supercharged, a 0-cost upgrade with the Superpower trait. As an action, discard a resource card from your hand to place 1 charge counter here for each resource icon on that card. Then, as a hero interrupt, when you make a basic attack, discard Supercharged to add +2 to that attack for each counter here to a max of +8, bringing your basic attack to 10, and even better, there's no mention here of only being able to have 1 of these in play at a time. So theoretically, if you had both of them out and they were both fully charged, you could use them both in the same activation window when you use a basic attack. So you could have 2 attacks at +8, or you could have 1 big attack at +16 for those of you who play with, multipliers. Other people. 2 copies of Concussive Blast is next. It's a 3-cost attack event with the Superpower trait. As a hero action, deal 6 damage to an enemy. If you paid for this with a resource card, ready Bishop. If you're not getting that ready, if you're just going for 6 damage, which, maybe you have to, maybe that's the best play you have, is pay 3 for 6. That's not very good, but if you can use a resource card to pay for part of this, then get that ready. Well, then this is very good. You can use your basic thwart, which exhausts you, hit somebody for 6 damage, which readies you, and then use your basic thwart again and now you've thwarted for 4 and attacked for 6. Command Authority is next. We get 2 copies of this 2-cost thwart event. As a hero action, remove 3 threat from a scheme. If you paid for this with the resource card, draw 1 card. This card is so good. It costs 2, but if you pay for it with the resource, you're getting part of that cost back in the form of a new card into your hand. Then we get 2 copies of Energy Conversion, a 0-cost defense event. As a hero interrupt, when an enemy attacks, shuffle each resource card in your discard pile into your deck, and it limits the amount of damage you can take from this attack to 3. And you'll resolve that before you resolve energy absorption, so the resource cards in your discard pile are going to get shuffled back into your deck before you start discarding to find resource cards and put them into your hand. And since you are going to probably be taking a lot of punches directly into your face, it's nice to have one that you know is limited to 3. Last up is 3 copies of Bishop's very own resource card, Stored Energy, which has the temporal keyword and generates an energy and a physical resource. The very resources you need to heal and ready Malcolm and Randall. What do you know about that? Also, it only takes 2 of these to fully load up a supercharged and let you punch for 10. The bad stuff. Bishop's obligation is Fear the Future. I would have gone with spent a decade trying to kill your friend's baby, but I don't work at FFG. You may flip to alter ego form, then you can exhaust as Lucas Bishop to remove Fear the Future from the game or discard this and each resource card from your hand. If you discard this and have no resource cards to discard along with it, this card gains Surge. Luckily, Bishop's defense sucks, so odds are pretty good that you won't have defended and won't be exhausted, so you can do the first option. Bishop's signature Nemesis minion is Trevor Fitzroy, who has 5 hit points, the elite and temporal traits, does 2 scheme and 3 attack, and he gets quick strike. So he does that 3 attack right away when he enters play. And after he attacks and defeats an ally, if Portal Through Time is in play, add 2 threat to it. Or if it's not in play, find it and put it in play. I hate quick strike so much. And 3? An unplanned 3 damage? That's a lot. Portal Through Time comes into play with 4 threat on it and an acceleration icon. And while it's in play, once per phase when a temporal card is revealed, it gains Surge. The word to pay attention to here is revealed. You don't reveal cards from your deck, you draw them or you play them. The only cards that get revealed are encounter cards, so don't worry, you're not going to have to add Surge to your cards with the temporal trait. Bantam is next. He has 3 hit points and the temporal trait. He does 2s in both scheme and attack, and when he's revealed, if Portal Through Time is in play, add 2 threat to it. And if it's not, find it and put it into play. At least this guy doesn't get stupid quick strike. Last is 2 copies of Temporal Trickery, a Temporal Treachery. When it's revealed, discard a card in your hand with the most printed resource icons. Place 1 threat on each scheme for each resource icon on that card. So that's probably 2 threat on every scheme in play. Don't take this guy against Red Skull. Onto his aspect cards, Bishop came with a leadership deck. Up first is Cable, as played by Nathan Summers. He's a 4-cost ally with 3 hit points, the Psionic and X-Force traits, and does 2 thwart and 3 attack, but that attack comes with 2 consequential damage. And when he thwarts and defeats a side scheme, draw 1 card. I'm sorry. Did Cable consent to being a part of the guy who tried to kill his baby's deck? 4 resources is kind of a lot, but that ability is pretty good, especially if you know you're playing a deck that has player side schemes in it, or you're playing an encounter that has a lot of side schemes like Red Skull. This is a very, very good ally in those cases, especially if you toss on an Uncanny X-Force, which is not only going to bring his threat up to 3, but now when he defeats a side scheme, you're going to draw a card, but also he's not going to be taking any consequential damage off of that. That's really good. Then we get Laura Kinney as X-23. She's a 3-cost ally with 3 hit points and the X-Force trait. She does 1 thwart and 3 attack, and after she attacks and defeats an enemy, ready her. 3 attack for 1 consequential damage? You throw some upgrades on her and just go to town. I love her. And hey, look at that. We next get 3 copies of a great upgrade to Toss Honor, Advanced Suit. It costs 0 and has the armor and item trait. It can only be played on an X-Force or X-Men ally, max 1 per ally. And as a response, when the attached ally defeats a minion or side scheme, discard a card from your hand to heal 1 damage from that ally for each resource on that card. That's great for Cable, but it is so fun to have one of these on X-23 and just let her kill everybody. She's awesome. Just 1 copy of Sidekick is next. It's a 1-cost upgrade with the title trait. It attaches to an identity-specific ally you control, max 1 per deck. The attached ally gets +2 hit points and becomes your sidekick. After you make a basic recovery, heal 2 damage from the sidekick. Now, I'm certainly not going to list every hero who has an ally as part of their kit, but basically every hero who has an ally as part of their kit probably wants to take this. There are a few heroes like Spider-Woman who has an ally that you almost want to build your entire deck around. She's got that great Captain Marvel ally that draws a card for you every time she activates. This is phenomenal for someone like her. Then we get 3 copies of Side by Side, a 2-cost event. As a hero action, ready your sidekick to ready your hero. Then choose to either heal 1 damage from both or give each +1 to their attack and thwart until the end of the phase. And this takes the idea of sidekick from being something that's kind of cool to being something that's really awesome and maybe worth building an entire deck around. Somebody like X-23 with Honey Badger, where they're just already just readying each other back and forth. Toss this in there and ready them all over again. And again, Spider-Woman and Captain Marvel. You ready Captain Marvel, you let her activate again, draw you more cards. Doctor Strange keeping Wong in play longer and readying. And if you ready Wong, that heals Doctor Strange or lets you see another card from the Invocation deck. There's a lot of potential with this card. Next is 3 copies of Suit Up, another 2-cost event. As an alter ego action, search your deck and discard pile for an ally and an upgrade that can be attached to that ally and add them to your hand. Find your signature ally and sidekick, but it's certainly not limited to that. Leadership has so many great upgrades that you can stick on allies, that so-called Voltron style, where you put out somebody like Yondu, maybe, who doesn't take any consequential damage, load him up with a ton of great upgrades and just let him do all the heavy punching for you. Only drag is that it is 2 costs, so hopefully whatever ally and upgrade you find you can still afford to play. Otherwise you just got to hang on to him until next turn, I guess. Our first basic card is Legion in the style of David Haller. He's a 3-cost ally with 3 health and the Psionic and X-Men traits. He does 1 thwart and 1 attack, and as a response, when he uses one of those basic powers, discard the top card of your deck. If that card's printed resource is an energy, deal 2 damage to an enemy. Mental, remove 2 threat from a scheme. Or physical, heal 2 damage from Legion. And if that card has 2 printed resources, like Bishop's resource card, then you're going to get both things. Though do note that wild isn't mentioned at all. You don't get to pick a different thing because it does say printed resource. So if this happens on a wild card, it just whiffs. Last up is Marrow, played by Sarah. She costs 2 to play, has 2 hit points in the X-Force trait. And you can only play her if you have the X-Force or X-Men trait. She does 1 thwart and 2 attack, and after she enters play, deal 2 damage to an enemy. Great cheap ally to try and get into play as many times as possible throughout a game. Use make the call or whatever to just keep bringing her into play, do 2 damage, take a hit for you, rinse and repeat. Also, Marrow, she has what appears to be deforming bone growths, and we went with Marrow? Yuck. For those of you who stick with the pre-constructed decks in this game, Brad Lake, Bad at Board Games, looking in your direction, Bishop's going to be fine. He's got 8 resource cards in this pre-constructed deck, and that's probably not enough to really showcase his abilities. I played my first 3 games with the pre-constructed deck, and in the first 2, energy absorption got me 1 resource card 1 time. That's it, in 2 full games. And that's no good. That's not what you want. You got to get a ton of resources into this deck so that that's going off every time. Energy absorption is going to get you maybe 2 or 3 every time you take a hit, and then you're looking at a hand that has maybe 5 or 6 resource cards in it. So you use your rifle and it's a massive hit. You use your uniform and you're back up to full health. And getting those 2 cards into play, the rifle and the uniform, especially the uniform, is pretty vital. You're going to want to keep an eye out for those as you're discarding cards off the top of your deck. If it goes into your discard pile, you know you got to drop down to Alter Ego so you can pluck that out of your discard pile, put it in your hand, get it in play. Of course, too many resources can also be a problem. There are few worse feelings in this game than drawing a hand of all resources and nothing to spend them on. Lockjaw is a perfect take in this case. You play him from your discard pile, so if you have a handful of resources, you're not in too much trouble. That's 4 resources to pull a pretty solid ally from your discard pile and put them directly into play. When White Fox is discarded off the top of your deck, you get to put her into play. So you're gonna be discarding cards from the top of your deck. Why not have an ally that goes into play for free? Machine Man can get you huge value if you have too many resources. You can get his threat or attack up to 4? Okay. And for those hands where you can't quite work out how to spend all of your resources, you might think about taking Plan B. Not only is it an upgrade that gets out of your deck, so you get only resources left, but you discard a card to do 2 damage. That's awesome. All right, that's all I've got for Bishop. Now get off my lawn.
The Grouchy Nerd